Welcome to Photoactive, a podcast about photography and technology. I'm Kirk McElhone.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. So we have a lot to talk about today.
So much.
So much. Where do we begin? Where do you want to start, Jeff?
Well, let's follow up a little bit on some of the things we've talked about in the last couple of episodes. We touched on some of the iPhone camera improvements in iOS 26, and you spotted something that actually came out in 26.0. And it's handy, but basically there's now a setting that says lens cleaning hints. I think it's in your settings and then camera. And basically, if the camera sees that your lens is dirty or obstructed, it'll just pop up a little thing saying, hey, clean your lens, which is actually kind of helpful. Although if you're shooting through a window, I've found it pops that up too sometimes just because maybe the window's not super clean. But, it's like a nice, helpful little thing because I never think to clean my always exposed iPhone camera lenses. Do you?
Probably not. But the thing that crossed my mind is, why didn't they have this years ago? Because the camera can detect. I assume what the camera's doing is it's detecting pixels that are in the same spot no matter where you move the lens, right? So it can tell that they're on the lens as opposed to someplace else. And this seems like a no-brainer that should have been there in the past. Now, I don't think I've ever noticed my camera lenses being dirty. I put the phone in my pocket. It probably gets wiped off every once in a while. I wipe it off with one of those yellow cloths, that we used to use to wipe off vinyl records, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was surprised to see it. And again, I think it should be there, but I was surprised to see it. Now, we also talked in a previous episode that the option to turn off the lock screen swipe to open camera, we said it was coming in 26.1. It is coming in. It is in 26.1, which is available now. It was the first thing I turned off on my iPhone. But you know what I've been noticing recently? I take my phone out of my pocket and it's unlocked before I look at it sometimes. I've seen this a number of times recently. Now, I don't have it set to unlock with my Apple Watch, so it's Face ID and I have to swipe up. And I think there's some way that I'm taking it out of my pocket that's swiping up and the thing is just barely catching my face, which seems surprising because, if you do a test, Face ID, if it's like on too much of an angle, it'll fail. It's pretty easy to get it to fail. And This has been worrying me a bit that it's unlocking itself. I'm going to have to look into this and try and figure it out. But I've seen this. I think I saw it with the 26.0, but I saw it a few times after the 26.1 update.
Is it possibly? Are you pushing the camera control button to unlock it? Maybe. No,
it's not. It's not going to the camera. It's going to whatever home screen.
Huh.
I think I've deactivated the camera control button. No, it's still there. It's still on, but I never use it. No, it's not. Right. It's not unlocking to the camera. It's unlocking to a home screen, which seems a little bit surprising. Could just be a glitch in the matrix. Who knows?
I mean, we are at 26.1, so usually a bunch of stuff gets worked out in the 0.1, but not everything. There's a problem I have on my Mac. When I have external discs mounted, for some reason they show up with the icon of some utility that I have. They don't show up as discs in the Finder windows.
I just saw that.
In the sidebar,
it's the Hazel icon.
I've seen the Hazel icon. I also have it as the Pure Raw icon. Okay. Yeah, I don't have anything mounted right now. But yeah, there's some glitch that I reported, and clearly that did not bubble up to the things that need to be fixed in 26.1. But, they're always running into things like this. And it's not a terrible thing, but yeah.
Okay, so we got an interesting tip by email. You want to talk about it?
Yeah. So this is, again, one of those little things you would never find it unless you knew about it or someone told you about it or you heard about it on a podcast or you did it by accident. Exactly. So when you're shooting a panorama using your iPhone, the way it works is, and I've always loved this approach because in the past, when I've shot panoramas with regular photos, you take a bunch of pictures, you stitch them together. It's kind of a multi-part thing. And what the iPhone and smartphones introduced is you can just literally move your camera across the field. So you click the shutter button to start recording, and you move the camera and it records the whole panorama, and then you tap the shutter button again to stop recording, and then you have this nice long stretchy panorama. Well,
and the camera has an aid with a line to help you keep it level as you're going across.
It does, yeah. And also super helpful, it tells you if you're going too fast because it's basically just stitching as it goes. I've always really liked that interface, but you have to push the button. Well, one of our listeners, Todd, wrote in and said, hey, did you guys know that when you get to the end of your panorama, if you swiftly move back in the opposite direction to the starting point, it saves that image and starts a new one. So super handy. I had no idea. And yet another example of here's something that an engineer must have put in, and I don't even know if it's documented. It probably is, but who would have guessed? So yeah, so if you're doing this quickly, you just move your phone back to the original position and it finishes your capture.
I have a feeling this isn't new and that I've encountered it in the past. Now, I don't have a lot of panoramas. I just went into my Photos app and I looked, and there were 30 panoramas, but I have to tell you, only a few of them are actual panoramas because the Photos app knows that they're panoramas. There's metadata written into files for panoramas. But if you crop a photo, and so a while ago, I was doing some attempts of cropping photos in 8 by 16, so basically 2.1 long width, and they're all showing up in there. And there are even some other photos that I cropped narrower. For instance, for an article about the MacBook Air, I have a photo looking at the side of two different MacBook Airs, one on top of the other, and I cropped it really tight. So it's more like I guess it's like a 16 by 6 or something like that. And that shows up as a panorama, in spite of the fact that it's not a panorama and the metadata doesn't say panorama. I even have some photos that I took of texts in books that I cropped because I wanted to save the quotes from them that show up in panoramas. And this is like Apple. You've got the metadata that says it's a panorama. Now, could it just be that Apple is defaulting to anything with that aspect ratio, assuming you could have imported a panorama from another camera?
I think that's exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. Or you cropped something to give it that panorama aspect, and therefore, because it's very deliberately short and wide, and therefore it acts as a panorama.
But it's not a fixed aspect ratio when you do a panorama. You can do a short panorama or a long panorama depending on where you are.
Right. But I think if it is longer than it is tall by a significant margin, it's probably just looking at that ratio and saying, well, this fits as a panorama, because it would be something that if you had taken a big picture and cropped it into that size, you're going to want to look in the panoramas. So it's not necessarily this is the specific metadata.
Not if I take a picture and crop. No. What are you kidding? I'm not an animal. I know where pictures go. Panoramas should be in the panorama section. Seriously.
I think that's going to be the title of the episode. I'm not an animal.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly send you a panorama, which is one of the few panoramas I've ever taken that I actually like. Most of them I do just for fun, but this one was at a beach by Whitby. Whitby's on the northeast section of the UK. It's famous for the fact that when Dracula, in the novel Dracula, came to the UK in a coffin in a ship, he landed at Whitby. And because of this, Whitby has a goth festival every Halloween.
That sounds awesome.
And it's a cool city. There's like ruins of an old church up on a hill overlooking the port. It's really cool. So this is on a beach north of Whitby. And this really shows the panorama. I mean, that beach, that the water on the beach there was straight for me, right? But as I was turning the camera, it gives it that curved look because of the distortion of the panorama. But at the same time, the horizon is really even and really flat. I kind of like the way this photo came out.
Yeah, it does a really good job. And looking into my Photos app, I can see I have a bunch of panoramas that were shot as panoramas, not by the iPhone, but using my DJI drone. Sometimes if we get like a really good sunset, I can put the drone up above my house and I have a view. When you're 400 feet up, I have a view of Puget Sound. And so there can be some really nice sunsets. And so it's also picking those up in addition to the ones that I've shot with the iPhone.
So maybe you'll put a panorama in the show notes as well. This will be the panorama episode.
I think we definitely should.
We should each have a panorama shot. Okay, the other thing we want to talk about is a new camera, and this is kind of interesting. Leica has released a camera called the Leica M EV1. Now, the Leica M is Leica's M mount camera series. So the M mount is the lens mount that Leica's been using for decades now. And all the Leica M's up until the present have been rangefinder cameras. So a rangefinder, and I think there's maybe one camera company that makes rangefinders other than Leica, but there's not many, because rangefinders are kind of hard to shoot. You're lining up two things in an optical viewfinder. And I mean, if you shot film with an SLR back in the day, you remember that that's how you would focus as well. You might have two circles or two squares or something. But with a rangefinder, you also have the problem of the framing lines in the viewfinder that correspond to the lens you're using or not.
If you remember, you had one of the Fuji X100s, right?
Yeah, it still has an optical viewfinder, but that's not a rangefinder. That's just looking through the viewfinder, which is what the Leica M cameras do. But the Fuji cameras, with the X-T3, the X100s, their optical viewfinder, it uses the autofocus from the mirrorless part of the camera. It's just letting you line up your composition. You're not focusing through the optical viewfinder in the Fujifilm camera.
Okay, so
where with a rangefinder, you're focusing through the viewfinder, right?
That's a good distinction, because I always thought that rangefinder was really just again, because I come to this more on the digital side. I thought it was just you're looking straight through what the lens is seeing, or sorry, not what the lens is seeing. You're looking straight through what the viewfinder is seeing, so you can get that sort of old time experience of shooting through without the electronic viewfinder. But you're right, because the X100V it does pop up like a little digital focusing rectangle in the corner.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing about a rangefinder is you have framing lines in it that indicate the approximate framing according to the type of lens you're using. And this works with a 28 and a 35 millimeter and a 50 millimeter. But once you get beyond that, once you've got a telephoto lens, what you're seeing in the viewfinder is large, whereas what you would see through the lens is much smaller, right? You're zooming into something, and it would be much smaller. And one of the problems with Leica M cameras with the longer lenses is it's really hard to focus, because you can't tell because what you're looking at is so far away. So Leica has long sold a viewfinder that clips onto the top of the camera, which gives you a better view. So the Leica M EV1 is not a rangefinder. It has an electrical normal viewfinder, as what we would call normal, because that's what most other cameras have. And what it's doing is it's working like a normal mirrorless camera. So what you see through the viewfinder is what the lens sees through the camera. And the advantage of this is if you're using longer or very wide lenses, then you can focus correctly. What's unique about this camera is there is no autofocus. So you have to manually focus. And there's a kind of a two double thing that you line up, or you can use focus peaking. And the rationale for this has been kind of interesting. I've been following this on forums and on Reddit, people talking about it. One of the reasons is for people with bad eyesight, for old people, dentists, lots of dentists buy Leicas. And when they get old, they have bad eyesight. And using a rangefinder is kind of difficult because you don't get the diopter correction the way you would on an electronic viewfinder, because you're looking through to a distance, and it's just harder to line everything up and get things in focus. So that's one reason for using it. The other reason is the ability to use different lenses without having to worry about the frame lines not filling up what you see in the viewfinder. So the viewfinder is showing you like a normal camera, I would say. It's kind of weird to have a manual focus only camera.
Yes, it is.
I think one of the reasons is that because of the way the M mount works, that they wouldn't have room to put in the autofocus. It doesn't seem as much like we're forcing you to use a manual focus because it's a Leica. It doesn't seem like that so much because, see, they already have cameras with autofocus. They have the Q series, they have the SL series. They're all autofocus if you want, and you can use manual focus. But this one is manual focus only, which is a kind of an odd idea, I think.
Does the previous M's, are those also manual focus?
All rangefinders are manual focus.
Okay.
I think back in the day, there were some rangefinders that had a sort of, remember how early autofocus worked with like, not lasers or something like that, that could do an approximate focus if you're just doing one subject. I think there were some early autofocus cameras, but all Leica M rangefinders are manual focus. And this is one of the things that Leica shooters like is this slow photography.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can set it to f8 and you can use zone focusing if you're doing street photography, and there's people who do that, but other people like that you have to take your time to compose and to focus.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like from an engineering standpoint, because this is no longer a rangefinder, they could totally make this an autofocus camera, but it sounds like they're deliberately not, because the people that want to buy this camera are the ones that, like, they want that challenge of manual focus. They want to be able to either shoot in like an older, more classic, old-fashioned way and not just sort of assume that the autofocus is going to take care of it for you. It seems like a very deliberate choice, not from an engineering standpoint, but just from a feature standpoint. Like, we are Leica, we can make this camera and it's just going to be manual focus because that's what we want to do. And we know that there are a certain number of people in our audience who will absolutely eat this up. And I'm sure they will.
They will. And it's apparently a bit cheaper than the current M11 models. It does, of course, unlike a Q series, which is a fixed lens, you've got to buy a lens in addition. So, we're talking, $8,000? We're talking $10,000 with a lens, any like average lens. So it's still not cheap. But it's an odd way to make a camera today. What's really curious is whether this will stick. I saw an article today saying it's like the entry into the Leica camera system, that maybe you're afraid of using a rangefinder because you don't know if it's going to work for you. So you might buy this, you buy a lens or two. And if you really like this and you want to try the rangefinder, you might move on. I'm not sure that would convince everyone because focusing is manual in either case. And again, depending on the lens you use, it might be really difficult to focus with a rangefinder.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, if you wanted to get into rangefinding, like, wouldn't it be better to get, an older used film camera that does the same thing? Like, wouldn't that be
like old Leica film cameras?
Point?
I'm not sure that there were a lot of cameras. I mean, you could probably get some used rangefinders, but would they work the same way as the Leica? Would they have the same focus assistance in the viewfinder? I'm not sure how this works.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting idea as a new camera. We talked recently about the Fujifilm X half, about how it's really popular in Japan and it's not popular in the States and other places. And I think it's good that we're seeing new types of cameras. Did we talk about the Ricoh? We talked about the Ricoh GR monochrome that's coming next year.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I think it's good that we're seeing this, I want to say, this evolution of types of cameras. Instead of focusing just on mirrorless, DSLRs are more or less dead. I mean, I can't imagine any camera company coming out with a new DSLR anymore. Instead of focusing on the basic mirrorless, we're getting these offshoots with unique feature sets.
Well, I think they're identifying – these companies are identifying the niches that will really grab loyalty. So you're going to have a bunch of people who are willing to spend as much for a Leica to make it worth Leica making these. And they're going to love the fact that somebody made this camera for me, or this is my Saturday Leica, right? That I'm going to take out, and I get to experience more of the classic photographic, not everything is done for me kind of reaction to, say, like the iPhone, where everything is done for you. And so these companies are finding these niches and really exploiting them. And I would guess, I haven't looked at the deep specs of the Leica, but it's probably using like the same sensor, the same high quality optics, like all those other aspects of having a Leica that are always consistently very good. You're getting all of that, but you're getting it with something different.
It's using the same sensor as the Leica M11. It's using the electronic viewfinder from the Q3, which is better than the M11. It's got more pixels. Another interesting thing is it doesn't shoot video. And maybe we'll link to the Petapixel review where, Chris and Jordan always do their thing, and Chris talks about the camera, and then he switches to Jordan to talk about video. And this one was really quick.
They just switched to like the old color bars on TV or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And, most people don't shoot video with cameras like that. Like there are people who always shoot video with that sort of camera, right? Because they're video shooters. But there are a lot of people who just shoot still photos and don't care about video. I don't care about video. If I want video,
totally. Well, and also
it's so much easier.
We've also seen we haven't really talked about it here because it's not really something that you and I do, but there have also been a lot of other camera models that are really focused on video. Like they're not video cameras, but they are little mirrorless cameras that will do a perfectly fine job doing stills, but they're really aimed at influencers, YouTube video, that sort of audience, and they excel on that video side of it there. So really just more and more and more options, which, I mean, 5 years ago, would you have thought that there would be so many different smaller options like this?
No, especially because it's easy now to have a sensor that shoots 4K video. Go back 5 years and we were getting 1080p, and that was enough. One of the reasons why this camera doesn't shoot video is you really want continuous autofocus when you're shooting video, and you can't do that with this camera. So it makes it relatively useless. Not to say that feature films are shot with autofocus cameras. They're not, but they're shot with everything carefully blocked out with one person called a focus puller, whose job is to turn the focus on the camera as it moves around, which is a very professional task in movie making. But a single person shooting videos of the family picnic is not going to be able to sit there and move the focus ring on the camera while the
those people do exist, and I'm sure they do. they do that. But that's okay.
I will say that I like to use manual focus on my Q3 sometimes. Because sometimes if you're shooting macro particularly and you're shooting a flower, you can't get it the right spot in focus. Or sometimes you just want to take the time to say, where am I going to focus? If you're in a sort of a landscape where you've got things in the front, in the middle, and the back, and where do you want the focus point to be? And I use focus peaking often. And that lets you show what is going to be in focus, and you can adjust your aperture. So I think it's an interesting process. I don't think I would want that to be my only camera. So this is not made for people who have to save up or sell all their gear to buy a Leica. Wouldn't recommend it. But if you can afford multiple cameras, this would be one that would be nice to have, just for, that slow photography feeling.
I kind of want to dig into that just for a minute, because that slow photography, partially it's because, again, me coming to photography more from the digital side, I do not have very much experience where manual focus was my only option. And so I think for a lot of people, and again, smartphones really push this, but you just expect now that your camera is going to hit the focus. And I would say most cases it does, but sometimes you don't actually know what it's going to focus on. This is something that I've had a little bit of frustration with my – so I still have my Fuji X-T3, and it has a fairly good autofocus. It's not nearly on par as like the latest Sonys, I think even the X-T5, but sometimes when I'm shooting, I actually did a senior portrait shoot this weekend, and it would hunt a bit. Like the person would be there, and some of the time it would focus on his eyes, and that's exactly where I wanted it, but sometimes it wouldn't. And so it becomes a little bit of that, all right, is it going to do what I want it to do? I'm expecting it to, but maybe it doesn't. And, a few of the shots, which would have been great shots, like it just barely missed, and so he's a little soft focus. So it's also that expectation that we have now that, well, every camera just needs to automatically focus, but you don't always know what you're going to get. I mean, kind of like generative AI. You don't know what you're going to get until you press the button, until you render the thing. And so with manual, you absolutely know what you're going to get because you're in control. And I think a lot of people really like that aspect of it.
I'm just looking at my photo library back in December 2013 when I got Titus. We've all heard about Titus the cat. And I took photos with an iPhone 5S, and half of them are crap. The focus points are all over the place, and if it's low light at all, it's terrible, and it's grainy, and if there's any movement, it's blurry. I mean, they were crappy photos, and a couple of them are good if it's during the day with plenty of light in the right space.
Yeah.
But most of the early photos for the first year were, I want to say, pretty bad. They got better. Let's see, if I go up, I've got to go, I guess, to the iPhone. When did the iPhone get better? Was it the 6?
I want to say the 7 or the 8 really felt like a big jump to me.
Yeah. So the ones I'm looking at with the iPhone 6 definitely look better already, but these are all daytime shots. One's a little bit darker, are a little bit blurry. So it's really not, I mean, we've made a lot of progress, basically. And these were difficult shots because he was moving around and he wouldn't stand still no matter how much I asked him.
Because cat.
But yeah, the focus point thing is a little difficult. And here's one that I shot with an Olympus EM10, where it's much better in focus. It's pretty much got his eyes in focus. So yeah, I think manual focus is a good exercise for anyone. If you have a camera that does manual focus, strongly recommend playing around with it. Because you'll learn a lot, and use focus peaking. What focus peaking does is it highlights items that are at the focal distance. So if you're looking at, I want to say, a flower, and you move the focus ring, you'll see the focus peaking move backward and forward across the petals as the focus plane changes.
Something like that is especially a good exercise because you see how it's operating on something that's not moving.
Okay, last thing before we finish, we said we were going to talk about a movie today. Do you want to go first? Because you actually saw it in this archaic way of seeing films, which I've not heard of this in a
yes.
while.
I went to this thing, this newfangled thing called a theater. So it's funny. We're both going to talk about the same thing for Snapshots. So it's the new movie by Guillermo del Toro is Frankenstein.
Guillermo del Toro is Spanish for Billy the Bull.
Is it really? Oh, yeah, I guess it would be.
Yeah, Guillermo is William, yeah. Toro is Bull. So
okay, now I will never see him differently. Anyway,
you'll never unhear that.
Anyway, so apparently Del Toro has wanted to make Frankenstein for years and years and years, and basically got the funds and the green light to do it. This is actually a Netflix financed film, and so it's on Netflix, but they did a fairly limited theatrical run, I think for awards consideration and just to see how it would do. And honestly, because he is Del Toro, because he is someone who is deeply invested in the theater and the movie-going experience, I can't imagine that he would have even shot a frame of this without some guarantee that it was going to have a theatrical release. Now, up here in Seattle, it was in two theaters, one that was in Monroe, which is 45 minutes away, and then another which was at this little like older theater. It didn't go to any of the sort of first run theaters here, but I got to go see it in a theater with a crowd. In fact, this is a theater, and this is going to sound strange. You can pre-order your tickets, but you can't choose your seat. Most theaters nowadays let you choose your seat. This one, you just had to go and find your own seat, like it was, I don't know, the 1800s or something. And anyway, this was definitely a great movie to see on the big screen. It is beautiful. It is gothic. It is lush. It's a little bit bloody. So, if you are squeamish.
There's one part near the beginning, yeah.
There are some wolves that get
the CGI wolves.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
But it's not a gore fest. It just
no
actually fits the topic. Anyway, I thought it was great. It felt a little bit too long, but it was still super enjoyable. And I think Jacob Elordi as the monster was especially good. How about you?
When I'm watching a movie, there comes a point when my mind says, do I want to keep watching this? And this happened about 30 minutes into the film. And I was really getting bored. And I figured I'm going to stick it out because I've mentioned I subscribe to Netflix for a month every now and then. And so I paid for Netflix. Fun fact, literally 10 minutes before I was about to go down to my computer to subscribe for November, I got an email offering me 50% off the first month.
Excellent.
They would have made an extra £9.49 if they had waited 15 minutes. So I sat through the movie incredibly frustrated. I thought it was boring. I thought it was all style, no substance. My feeling is it was so perfectly beautiful that even the messy parts were beautiful. And it was like too beautiful. It was the everything was too perfect. It didn't feel organic. I thought the acting was horrible. I thought Jason Isaacs was wooden. Mia Goth was Oscar Isaac. Sorry, Jason Isaacs, is that a brother?
No, it's Oscar Isaac and then Jason Isaacs, two totally different people.
Okay, so whoever was in this movie, I thought he was wooden. I thought the woman Ian Goth was very poorly cast. I thought Christoph Waltz was his usual funny self, and he was okay. I didn't find the monster very convincing at all. I found it too method. That's what it felt like. It felt like an actor showing how they can act. And I was really disappointed. At the end, I felt it was just, this was one of these prestige things that Netflix rolls out to make sure people keep subscribing another month. And it's not the main reason why I subscribed to Netflix for November. I wanted to watch the third season of The Diplomat, which was really disappointing. The first two seasons were great, and this one was a real letdown. So,
okay.
However, the Catherine Bigelow movie, A House of Dynamite, I strongly recommend that. I won't say anything about it, but I really did like that.
Okay, so just for everybody to know, we did not know what we were going to be saying about this.
No.
Kirk just said, hey, did you see Frankenstein? I was like, yeah, let's talk about it. Okay. I would say, well, this is good. This is good to know. One of the things that I liked about Frankenstein, and maybe it's because I started watching it and I was like, okay, I like the feel of this. I'm in, and I'm very curious about it. Have you read the book recently, the Frankenstein book?
No, I read it when I was a teenager, and it's important to note that he used the 1818 edition, the first edition, rather than the 1837 edition, which had a lot of changes. So I read a review that mentioned how they changed the order of the story. It's because they were looking at other Frankenstein movies and the 1837 edition, whereas the 1818 edition starts out the way the film does.
Oh, that's interesting.
More or less.
Well, so part of it was my kid had just read it in school. And so I got a full rundown of how it differs from the book. And it does differ from the book quite a bit. And I actually liked that there were a lot of things that were kind of jettisoned and really just kind of focused on Frankenstein and the monster and their dynamic. I will agree that the woman who plays Elizabeth, I think her name was.
Yeah.
Was just really underused. Like she was just kind of there.
But she looked like she didn't want to be there.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd misfire.
Yeah.
Overall, I liked it, and I would encourage people to check it out.
If you have a Netflix subscription and don't have to pay to go to a
theater. And it's out of theaters now. It was only there for like 2 weeks, maybe. So, and then otherwise, you're entirely wrong about The Diplomat. I loved it.
Okay. Did you watch the whole third season?
Yeah.
I thought it was okay until episode 7, and then it just went on and on and on and on and on, and then the whole ending of the episode 8 just was like, I just didn't buy it. But okay, we can talk about that another time.
And I haven't seen House of Dynamite, but I want to.
You do have to watch that. Okay, that's enough. We'll be back in a couple weeks. Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in this episode, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/photoactivecast. That's photoactivecast in one word. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review in iTunes or in your podcast.